Subcommittee on Homeland Security will come to order. Welcome to the subcommittee markup for fiscal year 2026 Homeland Security Appropriations Bill. I would like to welcome the full committee chairman, Mr. Cole, and ranking member, Ms. DeLauro, and subcommittee ranking member, Ms. Underwood, and the members of the subcommittee. I will hold my comments until the end, so I'll begin by recognizing the distinguished gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Underwood, for her opening comments.
Well, good evening, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we can all agree that whether it's at the border, the airport, our country's shorelines, or in cyberspace, the Department of Homeland Security cannot fail. But I also believe that the department cannot fail the ideals and values that make America the greatest nation in the world. Under the Trump administration, DHS is out of control, illegally spending hundreds of millions of our taxpayer dollars and flagrantly violating the rights and civil liberties of Americans. Under this administration, due process and the limitations that the Constitution puts on our government are being ignored. And this bill does nothing to protect Americans from being targeted. It fails to protect American citizens from deportation. It does nothing to protect American citizens from being confronted in their homes and offices or having their property seized, as this administration's deportation policies ignore legal safeguards. It allows ICE agents to continue to grab people in places of worship and in our schools without a warrant, and it punishes legal immigrants who speak their minds, all while rewarding for-profit detention centers with billions of taxpayer dollars. As members of Congress, we have a constitutional responsibility to keep this administration accountable in both how it spends taxpayer dollars and how it operates. We saw this year after our FEMA hearing, what this department does when anyone speaks truth to power. I am deeply concerned that if this bill passes and the Trump-Noam DHS goes unchecked, the United States of America will become a country that our own citizens will seek refuge from because of the repeated attacks on our basic freedoms and rights. Giving unchecked power to this administration is bad enough, but unfortunately, the bill makes things worse by leaving Americans more vulnerable to catastrophic cyber threats and burdening state and local governments. The bill adopts DOJ staffing cuts to CISA and FEMA personnel by roughly $130 million and $93 million, respectively. The burden to respond to the next ransomware attack on your local hospital or deadly hurricane in your district will increasingly fall to state and local leaders who lack the resources to protect your sensitive healthcare information from hackers. States don't have the ability to rebuild after disasters on their own. This bill abandons our neighbors after a crisis. Both the acting administrator and the recently named acting deputy administrator of FEMA have little to no emergency management experience. Let me say that again. The two most senior people running FEMA are severely underqualified at a time when an above-average hurricane season is forecasted, and when the Disaster Relief Fund is expected to end fiscal year 2025 with an $8 billion deficit. Listen, as recently as last week, the White House had to clean up after the brand new FEMA administrator was caught supposedly joking about the upcoming hurricane season. We are also heading into wildfire season in the West, and friends, the funding level provided in this bill is insufficient to help us dig out of this hole, and it all but guarantees that FEMA's Disaster Relief Fund will be at a dangerously low level again by next summer. Meanwhile, the White House requested $0 to supplement this critical fund that all Americans rely on to recover from major disasters, and fails to acknowledge an urgent $8 billion deficit in the Disaster Relief Fund. The bill fails to address the catastrophic cybersecurity threats facing our critical infrastructure, our hospitals, banks, schools, and secure government systems. And it does nothing to protect Americans from growing attacks on their privacy. The only people who benefit from this bill's failure to invest here are cyber criminals in China, Russia, and around the world who will now find it easier to attack Americans. Finally, the bill does not include funding for the Citizenship and Integration Program that has been running for more than a decade by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. This initiative funds faith-based organizations and community-focused organizations that help legal immigrants prepare to become citizens by preparing them for the citizenship exam and helping them learn English. Mr. Chairman, we make America stronger and more secure when we make investments in our community stronger and when we uphold our values. But this bill does neither, and I cannot support it. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I would like to note for the record that Ms. Escobar is not able to attend today's markup due to a canceled flight from Texas. I know she would join me in opposing this bill if she were here, and I would like that to be reflected. I yield back.
Thank you. The record will so reflect. Now I would like to defer to the chairman of the full committee from the state of Oklahoma. I recognize Mr. Cole for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd certainly like to thank you and Ranking Member Underwood. It's always good to be here with my great friend and partner, the Ranking Member of the full committee, Mr. Laura from Connecticut. So I enjoy being here. Keeping Americans safe and secure is a fundamental duty, and the measure we are considering this evening supports that mission. There's no denying that in today's evolving risk landscape, protection and preparedness are not optional. America must lead. The Department of Homeland Security plays a central role in that effort, and we're committed to providing the resources needed to safeguard the homeland on every front. While cartels and bad actors push at our borders, foreign adversaries and terrorists remain intent on hacking our systems, challenging our infrastructure and networks daily. Our defense against these threats starts with the brave men and women of DHS who stand on the front lines. Under new leadership, they've been empowered to fully carry out their work. The Trump administration has made it clear that protecting America is not negotiable, and this White House has taken immediate action to realign security priorities and enforce the rule of law. We've watched our southern border go from chaos to closed. The decisive actions and common sense measures of the Trump administration have led to an historic turnaround, driving illegal crossings to record lows and ensuring the removal of dangerous criminals. The bill before us makes key investments that sustain the Trump turnaround on the border by providing the funding to sustain 22,000 Border Patrol agents, increasing the level of ICE detention beds by 50,000, and funding border security technology to detect illegal immigration and stop the flow of fentanyl that poisons our communities. Additionally, to counter the growing threat of Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific, investments in the Coast Guard, including 3 fast response cutters, a service life extension to deploy an additional Indo-Pacific support cutter, and increased funding for operations, staff, support, and maritime engagements in the region are prioritized. Finally, the bill provides critical support for cybersecurity technology and makes strategic cuts to unauthorized missions to refocus the agency in charge of protecting critical federal networks from nation-state adversaries in cyberspace. I want to thank the staff on the subcommittee, both the majority and the minority, for their hard work on the product before us. Border security that we enjoy today should be crystal clear is due to this president. Nobody's more dramatically reversed a situation on the border than Donald Trump. The people who put America at risk were the officials of the last administration, not this one. This is a thoughtful first draft of what will ultimately be a negotiated final bill. But we're not going back to the insecurity, the crime, and the chaos of the last administration facilitated by those in Congress who supported those policies. So, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you again for your hard work, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Cole. I'd now like to recognize the ranking member of the full committee from the state of Connecticut, whose state flower is the mountain laurel, Ms. DeLauro. The floor is yours for your opening statement.
I want to say a thank you to the chairman in recognizing the mountain laurel, and also that Connecticut is the really the pizza capital of the country. So I think that you need to know that as well. Delighted to be here with you, Mr. Chairman, and to a ranking member, and with my colleague from Oklahoma. It really is the kind of work we've all done together, I think, is really what our direction should be for the future. I want to say a thank you to the subcommittee staff for their work on this bill. I am opposed to the bill before the subcommittee because this Homeland Security bill and the budget that House Republicans propose will make Americans less safe and more vulnerable to growing security threats. Despite the ever-increasing threats against American families, businesses, critical infrastructure, and national institutions, their bill weakens our national security and leaves Americans vulnerable to attacks from our adversaries by sharply cutting cyber and infrastructure security. Their bill fails to protect Americans from terrorism and violent extremism by eliminating targeted violence and terrorism prevention grants, which help local educators, leaders, and law enforcement agencies to identify threats and intervene before violence occurs. House Republicans allow the administration to abuse Americans' constitutional rights by shuttering key civil rights offices while blindly funding costly private-run detention centers with limited oversight, greenlighting sometimes illegal or mistaken deportations, abandoning due process protections, and defunding the community organizations that help these communities manage response to border issues. Never mind the fact that we still have not received a complete budget from the White House, we are holding this markup in a completely unprecedented time, with the Congress's authority being challenged by a lawless administration. Since taking office, President Trump and Elon Musk have illegally stolen resources appropriated by this committee, passed by Democrats and Republicans in the House and in the Senate, and signed into law by the President for programs and services across the federal government that help to grow the middle class, protect the working class, support small business, and make sure billionaires and mega corporations play by the rules and pay their fair share. The cost of living crisis is felt by every American family, middle-class families, working families, rural families, seniors, and other vulnerable Americans. But the president is not laser-focused on the cost of living crisis. He is actually making it worse. They are attacking programs created by Congress that protect our national security and keep America safe. Among the illegally frozen funding is over $100 billion awarded through FEMA for state and local governments to respond to disasters and mitigate future ones, protect against terrorism, secure our ports, and much more. President Trump and Secretary Noem have proposed completely eliminating FEMA. When FEMA's acting administrator, Cameron Hamilton, came before this committee and defended the existence of the agency that he oversaw, he was summarily dismissed. He actually testified, and I asked him the question, should we eliminate Federal Emergency Management Agency? And he said, while he believed that there were some reforms to be made, that he would not make that recommendation of elimination. Well, the very next day, he was fired from his job. I'm aghast at the notion that this country would cease to lend our fellow countrymen a helping hand after disaster strikes, but that is the administration's goal. Make no mistake, from housing to education to health care to disaster recovery, not one of our states can afford to take on the burden of everything this administration seeks to shift upon them. Everyone in this room knows that. They have canceled the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program, or BRIC, an incredibly popular and effective tool for state and local governments to help prevent the very damage and destruction FEMA responds to after disasters strike. It is hard to call this program, created in President Trump's first term, wasteful, when research has shown mitigation efforts like BRIC save a minimum of $6 for every dollar invested. And that savings more than doubles when including economic relief. In fact, Many of my Republican colleagues here today on this committee pleaded with the Secretary to restore BRIC because they know how important this initiative is to their states. These cuts are not just numbers on a page, and they are not only felt in Washington, D.C. They affect all of our constituents. In the last year, Connecticut has been devastated by wildfires, historic flooding, and damaging storms. Last fall, historic rainfall and flooding washed out several roads and bridges, demolished a major shopping center in Seymour, Connecticut, called Clarity's Village. 14 of the 16 businesses in the center were destroyed, almost all of them family-owned. Quote, "Everything is gone, everything is destroyed," said Mike Abbey, whose restaurant, the 67 Family Diner, ended up needing nearly $1 million in repairs. Connecticut announced a $5 million emergency grant program, but it was a FEMA federal disaster declaration that made enough funds, including SBA loans, available for the shopping center's businesses to rebuild. In the wake of disasters going back to Hurricane Sandy and Irene and even before, FEMA has played a critical role in helping the people of Connecticut get back on their feet. But now the administration is leaving them behind by stealing FEMA resources. Without the federal support my district needs to rebuild, mitigate future disasters, and staff emergency management offices, my constituents will be left hung out to dry as they try to piece their lives together and as they prepare for whatever storm strikes next. New Haven, Connecticut was slated to receive $25 million from FEMA for flood control, but this funding has been unlawfully frozen and is now putting our mitigation efforts in jeopardy, leaving my constituents exposed to the next flood. And in addition to mitigation efforts, Connecticut is losing emergency management support. Connecticut's Division of Emergency Management and Homeland Security relies on roughly $250 million in support. Dozens of emergency management leaders are supported with federal funds. And like many other states, FEMA helps fund well over 100 local emergency management offices throughout Connecticut. And this administration's threats to FEMA's existence endanger Connecticut's capacity to manage future emergencies. Bill Turner, Connecticut State Emergency Management Director, said, and I quote, "The option of just getting rid of FEMA and dumping it all on the states and locals isn't going to work," end quote. Emergency management, response, recovery, and mitigation is not waste. Helping our neighbors and fellow Americans rebuild their lives after disasters is not abuse. In the bill before us, House Republicans are doubling down on the administration's effort to throw the responsibility of disaster recovery and mitigation onto the states. In the face of worsening hurricanes, wildfires, and other natural disasters, they seek to reduce FEMA staffing, slash funding for climate resilience, and they ignore an $8 billion shortfall in the Disaster Relief Fund, even though they line up for the aid when disaster strikes in their own districts. Instead of focusing on ways to help lower the cost of living, help keep the American people safe from threats of our adversaries, extremists, and major disasters, House Republicans are using this bill to gut critical federal resources and advance their own agenda. I cannot support this bill, but my hope is that we can come together to improve this bill to support our country's safety and security. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member DeLauro. Do any other members wish to make opening remarks? Seeing none, I would first like to thank members of the subcommittee for their participation and insightful questions during our budget hearings this past month. You have all, on both sides, to a person, been real pros and class acts. While we don't agree on everything, the hearings have been meaningful, the discussion has been spot on, and I don't know what the other folks are doing to compare it with, but if it counts for anything with you, I'm proud of the folks on this committee on both sides for the way that we've handled things. I also want to thank the staff on the subcommittee, both on the majority and minority, for their hard work on the bill and the report. Since I expect there to be spirited amendment discussions in front of the full committee and seeing no amendments at this level, I now recognize Mr. Rutherford for the purpose of making a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the bill be favorably reported to the full committee.
The question is on the motion. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
The ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I request a recorded vote.
That's fine. A recorded vote has been requested. All those in favor of the recorded vote raise their hands. Seeing a sufficient number in support, a recorded vote is recorded. Mr. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Amade.
Yay.
Mr. Amade, yay. Mr. Case. No. Mr. Case, no. Mr. Ziscamani. Yes. Ziscamani, yes. Mr. Cole. Aye. Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Cuellar. No. Mr. Cuellar, no. Mr. Laurel.
No.
Mr. Laurel, no. Ms. Escobar. Mr. Gonzalez. Aye. Mr. Gonzalez, aye. Mr. Guest. Aye. Mr. Guest, aye. Ms. Henson. Aye. Ms. Henson, aye. Mr. Newhouse. Aye. Mr. Newhouse, aye. Mr. Rutherford.
Aye.
Mr. Rutherford, aye. Ms. Underwood.
No.
Ms. Underwood, no.
Does any member wish to change their vote? The clerk will tally. On this vote, the ayes are 8, the noes are 4. The bill is favorably reported to the full committee. I ask unanimous consent that the staff be permitted to make technical and conforming changes to the bill and report without objection. So ordered. Copies of the bill and report will be delivered to all full committee members' offices no later than 3 business days before the full committee markup. Thank you very much, everyone. That concludes today's markup. The subcommittee is adjourned.